So let's talk about how to actually drive the app tab by tab. So let's go through each one of these and talk about how to update it and how you're going to use it. Starting with the crew list. So the fully searchable crew list. This is very simply run off of this crew list tab here. Um, this formatting is really just for your printing. The app does not use this column for any reason. If you wanted to ever hide it, you could do so. It is using these roles, these names, these emails, and these numbers. That is what's very important. Um, it is also going to be using these in order to talk about the COVID responses. Um, so, very simply put, if you wanted to take a crew list you already had and you wanted to dump it into the app, you could do that very quickly. You could have a PA do it, you could do it yourself. Like I said, these are not important. If you wanted to hide it, you could do so. What is important is that these roles are the same. I personally actually use this as a printout for my own crew list too, and you can play with the formatting if you wanted that to be the case. Just be sure that you don't actually change the columns, as it's important that they stay the same. So that is the crew list tab and how to actually change these all from being crew member number 1 to your actual director. And if you do not want someone to show up, what's important to know is if you just delete their name, they will actually go away on the app itself. For example, the director, I just deleted that name. I'm going to reload that data. It would do that on its own eventually, but I want to refresh it immediately. Boom, the director's gone. So you won't actually have a bunch of empty spaces, so to speak, if you, for example, didn't have an accountant or whatever. You clearly should have an accountant. So let's talk about the next tab. Let's talk about the prep schedule. This is a very, very easy thing for you to update. In this, you're going to go to the control center, and you are going to play with these file links and the prep schedule. So if you wanted to have a prep schedule web link or a physical, it would be here. If you wanted to have a web, it would be there. If you wanted to have a file, it would be there. So obviously this goes to an actual website. This is actually that web view that we saw right here. And that third one is the actual file link, which is just a Google Drive share link like I showed you earlier, where you would just take the link to the prep schedule, you would say get link, you would make it public, and you would paste it in there, and it would automatically pop up there. If you wanted any of those elements to go away and to hide, for example, maybe you don't want the web view link, you would delete that, and eventually, once it updates and propagates correctly, that web view should go away and it won't be in the way of everything else. So that's how that works. I'm going to add that back for now though. So that is the prep schedule tab. Next, let's go and talk about the actual shooting day tab, or the shoot day tab. That is right here. That is also going to be accessed in the control center. So if you go down here, this is actually the shooting day, right? So you could update this one if it was shooting day 2. You would update the date. It's automatically going to update here. This is your call time. This is your base camp address, and this is your set location address. So if you wanted to update, you would update anything here in white. And generally speaking, if it's green, it's going to be a menu item. If it's white, it's for you to change. And if it's blue, it's a formula, and it's probably best that you don't mess with it. For example, these two formulas are talking to one another. But once again, if you don't want anything to show up, then just delete it and it won't show up. It's not a big deal. So that is how you change the shoot day tab. It's right there. And just remember that on the shoot day, you also have these call sheets or the sides, right? These are our file links. So if you wanted to show the call sheet, you would just paste a link to your Google Drive or your Dropbox where you've actually uploaded that. If you wanted to paste a link to your sides, you would come in here and you would update that there. And that is how you update the call sheet / shoot day tab. All right, let's talk about the COVID symptom check tab. So the COVID symptom check tab is really a pretty simple yet complex thing if you let it be, but it doesn't have to be. I'm going to walk you through how this looks on the day-to-day when you're actually with your COVID compliance officer. So the COVID symptom check is all those names are pulling from this crew list, just like the crew list tab. The trick there is that what he is seeing on his end, so on the COVID response sheet, is he's actually seeing, I'm going to add back our director here so we have our entire crew. He's actually seeing anyone who has a check mark next to them too. So for example, if you had a bunch of people here or a bunch of day players and you had your COVID officer on set and you only wanted the people to show up in that COVID response that were actually working that day, you could have your PA come in here and they could check everyone that was working and uncheck anyone that wasn't. That way he wouldn't spend any time chasing people that weren't actually working that day. So as those responses come in, they're going to come into the green sheet that's hidden, and then they're going to show up here. And these formulas are going to do some magic, and it's actually going to kick a response to our COVID compliance officer, whether people have responded, whether they're symptomatic, whether they're non-symptomatic. And that's how that works. So how to actually, once again, we'll go through it one more time. Day-to-day maintenance of this is just basically keep your crew list up to date and make sure that you're copying and pasting these formulas down. Now the trick with actually displaying the COVID response tab, not your actual COVID response symptom check menu item, but this tab right here. So, because remember, this is health information, so it's something you kind of want to keep separate. The way that you actually hide that from anyone that you don't want to see is you don't put granted next to their name on the crew list. For example, here, granted is next to my email. It correlates to this email, not the name, the email. So if you wanted to give, for example, the line producer access to be able to see that when they open the app, make sure, one, that they've logged into the app using the same email that they have on this crew list, and two, make sure granted is actually pasted next to the line producer's name. And that will allow that to show up for them. It's that easy. And that is how the COVID response works. Now, once again, if you didn't want to give your COVID response coordinator or your COVID compliance officer, I should say, access to this whole sheet to see these COVID responses, you can actually take this information and pull it into another Google sheet and just give them access to that sheet. So you actually would have two levels of safety in order to protect the data. I'll go into how to do that in another video. It's very easy, it's very quick, but I'm not going to talk about that right now. All right, so let's get into daily timesheet tab. This is another one of those things that's very fast. So this list of departments, obviously every movie has similar departments, but maybe the names would change, or maybe you would have, I don't know, maybe you wouldn't have a special effects team on your film. So all you would have to do in order to change what's showing up there is right here. You would just add or remove names as you would. It's that easy, it's not complicated. Okay, and once people actually go in here and they submit their times and their information, where that data spits out, once again, is in the timesheet green tab that's hidden, and then gets pulled into this blue, and then it's easily accessed by anybody that you want to access it. And once again, if you didn't want to give the second access to the app sheet or the master sheet, there's a formula, it's very quick and easy, that will actually pull all of this information live into another Google Sheet, which I will go into in another video. Anyway, that is the daily timesheet tab. It's very simple, it's very easy to use. And once again, that tab is actually set up to sort so that your second can actually sort this by date worked, which is probably going to be the most common way he's going to do it, or maybe even department. Okay, so let's talk about the info sheet tab. Info sheet tab is, once again, this is just queuing off of the crew list. So as you can see, very important to keep your crew list up to date. And then it's going off of these crew members. And so that information, once again, it's going to be spit out into the crew info sheet, right? It's very, as you're seeing the pattern here. So all the data is going to come in here. If you ever wanted to look up someone's emergency contact information, if you wanted to share this information with someone else, this is where you would go to get it. And once again, there's a way you can actually pull the information just from this tab into a separate Google Sheet to give someone access to it where it doesn't compromise the rest of the data. That is the crew info sheet tab. Let's talk about the catering menu. All right, the catering menu, it's very simple, it's very fast. If we go to our control center and we go down to our catering menu, this is where you're going to list off the menu items that you want. This column is actually giving you totals for those menu items. So for example, if your caterer was wondering how much people were going to eat of each item, you could just copy and paste this whole thing and put it in an email and shoot it to them. Or copy and paste this chart and put it in another spreadsheet and shoot it to him. So it updates live, but he could give you a menu for all the different menu items. You would list them here, and they would automatically pop up as options here. It's very fast. It's very easy. So yeah, that is the catering menu tab. The schedule and script tab, it's very simple. When we go back to our control center, if we go to our file links, schedule and script right here. If you want your one-liner, boom, cast, script, boom, boom, boom. Just make sure, once again, the privacy setting is set to where anybody can view it. All right, the last tab we're going to talk about is our accounting frequently asked questions tab. Now this one is, once again, very simple. In our accounting FAQ tab, if you want, you have 10 questions you can actually list here. So what I would do is just have accounting submit the questions, give you their answers, and then whether they want file links or web links or email links, you would just update that here. If you didn't want a question to show up, for example, in here, there's different variations of actually what's showing up, maybe a question, just a link. You would just delete the information, and it would go away. You wouldn't have to worry about it actually showing up or not. That way it doesn't get messy, and it's very clean and very easy for people to use. So the last thing we're going to talk about is our Office Contacts tab. This, once again, in our control center, if we go to our Office Contacts tab, the reason this is separate and not just pulling off of the payroll accountant's name on the crew list is obviously sometimes accountants set up very separate email addresses just for a movie, or maybe the assistant has an email versus the primary payroll accountant. That allows some flexibility here. So you would simply just update this information with whatever the accountants wanted you to, and that would give you access, or that would automatically update what you're looking at here. The last thing I want to talk about is how to actually turn on and off these tabs. So it's very easy to do. The show menu, all you would have to do is uncheck or check this if you wanted to show up. For example, during prep, you probably wouldn't want that to be showing up. There'd be no reason for it to show up. It'd probably be kind of confusing to people. If you didn't want to use the catering menu, maybe you wouldn't want to use the catering menu. You would uncheck that. And if you refresh this, or if you were actually on the app on your phone, you turned it off and turned it back on, or got rid of it by swiping up, eventually, boom, those tabs are going to go away. It's going to look a lot cleaner and a lot easier to use. And then if you left prep, for example, maybe you wouldn't want to show the prep schedule, but you would want to show the shoot day and maybe the catering menu, you would do that, and then once the app refreshes, it will actually pop those tabs again. So that is how you actually control the app menu. If you ever wanted to change the names of any of these to maybe something slightly different, so maybe pre-pro schedule instead of prep schedule, maybe you even had a crafty person who had a menu, you could change these by just changing it here. Because once again, if it's white, it's free to change. If it's blue, it's a formula, don't change it. If it's green, it's a menu item. So that is kind of the basic overview of the entire app. That's it. I know it was kind of long, but it's a lot, but it's also a little, if that makes sense. So in the next video, well, actually, let me talk about this really fast. So these two dates, the reason there's two dates here, they're actually queuing off of your shoot date here. And it's accounting for an overnight in these responses. It just allows the COVID officer to say if anyone happens to be working today or tomorrow in an overnight situation, it's gonna keep them on that COVID response checklist for him. That's what that's doing. So don't delete that. Very important. All right. So yeah, as you see here, this is where your catering responses is, your timesheet responses, crew info sheet. That kind of concludes our overview of how to drive the app. In the next video, I'm going to show you that trick on how to pull information into an empty spreadsheet from one of these, and that way you can actually share that to a department head and it doesn't compromise the core app control center, so to speak.